Hello, I'm Kevin Anderson. I'm the intern pastor here at Love of Christ. And every week, the pastor that is preaching will do a brief study on the first reading for the Sunday and the gospel reading. And our first reading for this Sunday, the sixth Sunday after Easter, comes from the ninth chapter of Acts. Just a little bit of background on the book of Acts. The book of Acts is the second volume of a two-part work, Luke and Acts. I would encourage you to read Acts and then go immediately into Luke. They are written by the same author, Luke, and his traveling co-worker, Paul. And the stories fit together very nicely. So I just encourage you, if you're ever doing your own personal reading, go through Luke and then go immediately into Acts and read them together. It's very helpful. Now, the focal point of Acts is this, that the good news of the risen King Jesus leads to the formation of communities where individuals from various backgrounds are treated with equality as they pledge their allegiance to Jesus and live according to his teachings. Now, there's a few things kind of going on in Acts, and one of those significantly is the power of the Holy Spirit is given to human beings. And the reason that that happens is for Jesus' ongoing mission to Israel and to the nations after his departure. That work continues through the disciples as they are given the gift of the Holy Spirit. In a lot of the book of Acts, you see this self-giving faithfulness of the early church. There's a lot in this book of acts of generosity, healings, serving others. There's also conflict. It's all in the book of Acts. It's a fabulous story of the early church, and it's interesting to see kind of how this all plays out for the early church, and there's a lot of parallels to what we have going on today in our world. Now, the setting for this is Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. And if you recall, Jesus tells his disciples that they will be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And that's an interesting thing for us to think about when we think about our sense of mission, what we are called to do as followers of Christ. Jerusalem can be our smaller rings. You can think of your local church, Love of Christ. Judea, you could even think of the state of Arizona. How are we being a witness beyond our local community? Samaria, you can think about the larger United States. And how are we partners in ministry with the partners that we do have? How are we investing in those ministries and supporting them? Because our witness is called beyond our local congregation. And this is clear in Jesus' command for us, and this is clear in the book of Acts, that this thing grows out beyond itself. That's one of the gifts of being a part of the ELCA, a larger church, is that we can more effectively be mission partners beyond our own local context because we have relationships, established ministries, mission support throughout Arizona, throughout the United States of America, and across the globe. And our support of these ministries, these mission ministries, is living into the command that Jesus gives us. In a lot of these places where we have mission partners, we can do it much better than just Love of Christ could ever do it, because there are established relationships, there are effective partnerships that have been around for a long time. And so the dollars that we give, the mission that we support, the activities that we do is a witness to this larger sense of church and this larger call, this larger command that Jesus gives us as his followers. So the years that we're looking at in the early church are 30 to 60, and the authorship of the book is shortly after that timeline. Now I just want to give you a little bit of what has happened up to this point in chapter 9 where we're at. Jesus ascends into heaven, Pentecost follows, it's the gift of the Holy Spirit, and the church grows because of what happens on Pentecost. It's not an easy life for the first followers of Jesus after his ascension, however, because disciples are arrested for proclaiming the resurrection. There's some beautiful stories of how these disciples are being questioned, being brought forth the authorities, the religious leaders, And they give these testimonies to how Jesus is the Messiah, the fulfillment of the Scriptures. The Holy Spirit continues to work. Those in authority want to kill the disciples for their proclamation that Jesus has been resurrected and that he is indeed the Son of God. The disciples are witnesses in word and deed, and they're both what they say and what they do. And then we have the famous story of Stephen when he is martyred. Then, as we heard this past week, we get the story of Saul, who is converted in his experience in the desert with the resurrected Lord. And this week we're going to hear about Tabitha, who is resurrected. And then right after this text that we hear of Peter's vision of clean and unclean animals. And so the church begins to expand to Gentiles, to non-Jewish people. And so we just see again that in chapter 3, that church growth, the Holy Spirit moving, it just continues to happen in the book of Acts. But for our text today, we are learning about Tabitha. I'll read the text first. Now in Joppa there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, who heard that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. And when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Peter put all of them outside, and he knelt down and he prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Meanwhile, he stayed in Joppa for some time with a certain Simon, a tanner. So there's a lot going on in this text. One of the themes that we can pick up on is reversal. And we see this as Tabitha is dead and she becomes alive. That's a reversal. Thus far in Acts, we have Saul who becomes Paul. Again, this reversal where we go from someone who is killing Christians, who is persecuting Christians, to someone who is going and spreading the good news about what Christ has done. And then Peter, who is here, Simon Peter, who goes from doubt to denial and fear, from denying that he is a follower of Jesus, to resurrecting a disciple from the dead. That's a big reversal. And again, this resurrection theme, this resurrected life of Jesus, continues to be lived out through these disciples. Now, Tabitha, she's an interesting character in this story. She's a female disciple, and Luke, the author, has a way of reminding us, illustrating for us, that this work of God is going to come through unexpected people in unexpected ways. So the mention of this story of a female disciple being resurrected it's significant because it's outside of the norm of what might be expected. Now, Tabitha is known for her good works and her acts of charity, particularly her making clothes and blankets and such. And I think ultimately what I invite us to reflect on is our sense of call and our sense of vocation. Now, vocation is the work that we do in the world. And Luther, our very own Martin Luther, has a lot to say about the idea of vocation. And I think central to Luther's understanding is this rejection of spiritual callings or spiritual vocations as being more important than, quote, secular callings or secular vocation or secular work. No, for Luther, there is no higher and lower in vocation or call. So Luther says it very plainly when he says that changing diapers is a holy act. So vocation is the work that we do that can seem so mundane and so ordinary, that it isn't anything significant. And Luther pulls us into the idea that no, these simple acts God uses, God works through them. In one writing, Luther describes someone who milks a cow as that is actually God who is milking the cow. That's a whole different way of thinking about the simple everyday acts that we have to do. This can be, if you think about your own life, that can be being a grandparent, being a friend, going to work, taking care of others, driving responsibly, right? All of these things that we think everyone should do. Of course, you should just do them normally like everyone else, or you should do them in a good way. Yeah, yes. And there is also the sense that God is working through whatever is happening. And we can think about that with Tabitha. Tabitha was known for her acts of charity and her good works, and specifically her making of clothes and blankets and such. And it would be easy to write off her work as simple or a lesser work. And what I mean by that is she isn't giving away millions of dollars and building a new church. She's simply making clothes for people. But if you look at Tabitha's death and the reaction to her death, it's significant. So even her little humble acts of making clothes are much more than just making clothes. And I think this is what Luther is getting at in this idea that God is at work through our work. This becomes a vocation. It becomes more than simple things. This isn't just simply making clothes for Tabitha. The things that she makes has an impact on people beyond just the clothing itself. And it becomes much more than a blanket or a tunic. And this is the idea that we can hold on to as disciples. That God is at work in these very simple things that we think are simple and meaningless and trivial, but they're not. God is present and at work in and through these things. And it isn't necessarily, even for Tabitha, that she's thinking about how holy the clothes that she is making, right? Think about how many times she probably made a piece of clothing and it didn't work out, or she poked her finger, or she messed up and she had to start over. There's probably some suffering along the way. But through her work, through her sense of call to do this, God is at work in the simple and the mundane things. And so I ask you, what is your vocation? What are the things that you do every day? And are we aware that God is present and at work through simply being a grandparent, through a caring neighbor, through just the most simple things that we take for granted all the time? Are we aware of God's presence in action? Are we looking for it? And does that change maybe how we see those that we disagree with when they do something kind to others, or perhaps even to us? If we recognize God at work, does it change our perspective? Do we witness something more going on? So blessings to you as we prepare for worship this coming Sunday.